We don't need to be concerned with the mechanics. We need to be concerned to where, is it getting us where we want to go? Is it allowing us to do what we want to do?
What's going on, everybody? I'm Dallas, your host at People of the Future channel. I'm happy to have you back with Greg Liburd of Refraction. In this episode, I feel like Greg dropped a lot of great gems, like maybe t-shirt quotes or something, like good wisdom. So pay attention. So you did start talking about this a bit. I'm going to tweak question 2, which was what were the early days of creating Refraction like? I'm specifically curious about the barriers and how y'all problem solved them.
Yeah, great question. Seed Club was a lot of help because when you have questions around token design or not token design and how to structure things and what kind of tools are out there, that there were a lot of resources that were available to us, and probably most importantly, the expertise and knowledge and being able to ask questions with people who are familiar with what you're doing and or what you're trying to do. And so that was something. I think one of the things in this space is it's not move fast and break things, but I do think that you don't know until you go out there and do it. And so overcoming, I don't want to say inertia, but overcoming what looks like a daunting space. And when you are looking at the nature of things that are on chain and the immutability of the blockchain, I think sometimes there's a tendency to be extremely measured. And there are things that are, like I always thought, it's when you do a startup, you don't necessarily have to do a lot of foundational work that's going to be permanent, whereas to some extent that could happen. And so I think that Seed Club is really good at just saying, you know, push the button, start the car, get the rocket in the air. And so I think that was part of it. I mean, again, we had an understanding of what's going on, but I also think, and one thing I would say now as well to folks who are doing things in this space is just because you're working in, you're working with new tools doesn't mean old tools or methodologies or frameworks are are not valid. And I think a lot of my learnings that came from the startup world were were very valid and continue to be. So I think that that's one of the challenges is understanding what things are different, um, and what things can be applied with new ways of executing against it. So, for example, it is very similar, like kind of standard token release for a native token is 10 million. And I think that that mirrors the fact that you have 10 million shares in a typical like C Corp if you're just doing it out of the box. And so some of the same things about how you communicate with your stakeholders and how you sort of look at your roadmap and how you're going to advance are probably very similar. Like that knowledge base is there. Another way of looking at it as well is that this whole model is similar to, there are a lot of similarities to a cooperative model. And it's being able to learn and see what's been done, from a perspective of, like one of my, like a book that I think gets referenced a lot in this space is Impact Networks by Mr. Ehrlichman. And those lessons that have been learned by groups that have been coming together for a common good and to produce abundance for everyone who's involved and have people have a say in what's going on. Those have been around for a long time. So I think just learning to understand where we want to innovate and where we want to be exploratory versus where we want to use the lessons and wisdom from um, other models that have been around for a long time. Like, I think that's a challenge, but once you start to get it, it makes things go more smoothly because you're not reinventing every single wheel on on the train that you're trying to build. Only the ones that are going to get you up that hill.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of idea. Yeah, I appreciate that perspective, especially with this group of interviews I'm doing for our channel. The theme is world building, and what does that mean? And I think, for some people, when that feels like we get a scoff or an eye roll, like the world is what it is this idea, well, some things work, some networks work, some systems work fine, others are designed for um, more heinous reasons. But in terms of what we're thinking about with our liberation and our creativity, using models and looking back into the past, especially across our like culturally relevant leaders, it's, I think, a similar narrative of pulling what has worked before and using that wisdom to help us build. I love when Greg says it's not move fast and break things, but you don't know what you're doing until you do it. That's not word for word. But I really felt that as someone who learns with my hands and wants to understand what's going on and then apply. That really spoke to me and resonated. So here's your first journal prompt. In the world you're building, what are some old tools that could have new uses? I'll be honest, for me, the Web3 space, the crypto space feels pretty overwhelming. I have dabbled a bit. It also feels pretty unwelcoming because everyone I see in it is a white guy. Really, until I spoke to Greg, I did not feel confident or like getting involved would be a good idea for someone like me. So, your journal prompt is to reflect on those old tools that might have new uses. And are there any worlds that you haven't played around with because of your preconceived notions about what they're like? You spoke about how artists in the refraction model have ownership over their creativity. Can you speak more in general about how a DAO does this for artists?
Sure. And I can also springboard off one of the points you said about people who are reluctant and I think that having hesitance or suspicion or being critical over these new models, because most of the time when things are introduced, it's for the benefit of the person introducing them. And I think that there's two things that we do to speak to your comment about world building is we did a hello world and just to introduce what we were doing in an art, in your article. And in that we spoke about this notion of movements and especially in the music field. So whether you're it's Chicago House or Detroit Techno or New York Underground, and a lot of these that are typically driven by folks who are outside or on the margins or not let in into the into the mainstream in terms of um, you know whether it's BIPOC people or LGBTQ or folks from other cultures who drive a lot of these cultural movements that eventually become people try to hop on board and monetize them and everything else. And so I think that one of the things that the world building is really important, and that what we're trying to do in terms of understanding the importance of creatives and the impact that they can make is that honestly believe that's why a lot of people have come into our community. And I also think at the end of the day, part of our job and other jobs of the people who are building is to do it in a way that the tools and technology doesn't get in the way of everything else. It should be a transparent layer. And the fact that folks have focused on that could be because there are these early adopters and a lot of people who drove this, especially because there was wealth generation created by people who bought ETH when it was like $10. Even in a down market like that, like now, they're still doing quite well. So there's a fascination and interest in what's going on under the hood, but most people just want to drive a car or get in a bus, or I mean, like most other things in our society are, we're not concerned, or we don't need to be concerned with the mechanics. We need to be concerned to where, is it getting us where we want to go? Is it allowing us to do what we want to do? And it's very hard to do. Like, how do you create that story? How do you not make it about the details, but about the greater vision, about the shared narrative, and the type of things that drive advances? It's because people believe in the mission and the vision. It's not because people believe in the specific tech or details, or specifics. So I think that that's part of our goal.
I love what Greg is guiding us to here. And what happens when a community says, actually, you know what? The how doesn't matter so much right now, but we are very clear on where we want to go. What happens when a community gets more clear about the world they're building rather than the tools and what's under the hood, as Greg put it? I really wanted to emphasize this point because I think it can give us such a beautiful discussion with our partners, our family, especially parents, our children, and the people we work with, the people we play with, the people we live next to, our neighbors. What do we want our neighborhood, our street, our block to look like? And let the essence of what we're working towards be the fuel to create with tools old and new. World building is so much better with comrades, so I do hope you'll bring these ideas to the people in your life and play around with the idea of the what versus the how. Let's keep listening to Greg and see how refraction builds with these tools.
Because the agency part, which is sort of the second part of what you're saying, if I got the question right, is that we work really hard to do to allow creatives space, and this is a space in and of its own. But for example, when we have I was just talking to another creative grants recipient today, and we're talking about maybe models where we're involved in having some of their native token, and an arrangement where, if the project that they're working on it with has legs and they want to keep it going, we'll create a structure for them to be able to get on chain, position themselves for future growth, build a community around it. But they've already gone through for those who don't know, our creative grants program is one where we take submissions, and for grants, we have a curatorial team, but we also have the community who sort of whittles them down to the ones that best suit, that we think will benefit them and our community the most. And then what happens is our community votes on the ones that get in, and then we provide cash and access to our resources. And so the next phase of that is potentially, for some of them, saying, okay, well, if you want to be persistent and keep going, then here's a way that will hopefully be enabling you to grow. But we're not in the business of curating for them. We're not in the business of determining what their creative vision should be, or what have you. It's like, once they're operating on their own. That's the kind of agency that, to me, hopefully makes a lot of sense to artists and creatives. It's that there's still criteria for you to get in, and there still has to be a quality of work, and there has to be a passion, and there has to be the ability to be able to be able to accomplish what you're trying to do, and experience and everything else. And those all come into play. But once you're there, that it's like, okay, well, here's some cash money for you to book studio space, or for you to get a Solidity developer to develop a smart contract for you, or for you to pay artists who are going to be performing, or anything else. And then now go for it and figure it out.
As usual, huge thank you for watching and sticking around with us. If you like what you're seeing and you're new here, be sure to subscribe. If you are a subscriber, Big hearts, big love. We appreciate it. Please leave down in the comments things that came up for you, and make sure you check out Refraction on their website. Follow them on Twitter. Be sure to check out Common Healing at our website. Be sure to check out Common Healing at our website and our social media handles. Also down in the description, we offer free resources and ways for you to continue these world building conversations where you are. We'll see you next time.